They say every old building has its ghosts, but some buildings are more than just haunted. Vermouth Asylum, once a place of supposed healing, isn't just haunted. It's hiding something. You might think it's just another abandoned asylum, but this one has a history that's still alive. People come and go, but the truth of what happened here, that truth never left. Hidden deep under the asylum, something was buried. Something that no one, not even the doctors, were meant to find. And it was down there, in the depths of the asylum, that the story took a dark turn. We'll also reveal whether our previous story, the terrifying legacy of the exorcism of Anneliese Michel, is true or fictional at the end of this video, so stay tuned. Vermouth Asylum opened its doors in 1885, designed to be a place of refuge for those struggling with mental health. At first, it seemed like a place of progress, a state-of-the-art facility offering the best care for its time. But no one knew that the very foundation of the asylum would be built on lies. The building was designed to house hundreds of patients, but it was soon overcrowded. The doctors, desperate to maintain control, began using harsh methods that, by today's standards, would be considered criminal. But back then, they were justified as medical treatment. The asylum's reputation quickly grew darker. Treatments that seemed cruel even by the standards of the time, like electroshock therapy and lobotomies, became routine. But there were rumors that the asylum was hiding something much darker beneath its polished but crumbling walls. Whispers spoke of strange experiments conducted in the basement, experiments that never appeared in the patient records. Patients who were brought in for treatments would sometimes vanish, taken to the lower floors, never to return. And when staff tried asking questions, they were told to forget what they had seen. By the late 1920s, many had begun to suspect that the asylum was more than just a place of healing. Staff were instructed to keep patients quiet, to avoid prying eyes, and to stay away from certain areas, especially the lower levels. In 1999, a group of urban explorers decided to see what lay beyond the decaying walls of Vermouth Asylum. The stories and the rumors had always lingered. Now they wanted to find out for themselves. They made their way through the decaying hallways. The building was a skeleton of its former self. As they ventured deeper, they discovered strange things. Old, yellowed medical records, cryptic notes hidden under floorboards, and photographs of patients whose eyes seemed to follow them. But nothing could prepare them for what they would find in the basement. They reached a door that had been sealed shut for decades. The door wasn't on any of the original plans. There was no record of it existing in any of the asylum's archives. But it was there, hidden behind layers of rotting wood and crumbling stone. And when they forced it open, they found something they could never unsee. Behind the door was a narrow tunnel, its walls covered in strange markings, symbols that looked ancient, like something out of a nightmare. The air inside was cold, too cold, as if something were drawing the heat away. The explorers felt a chill that ran deeper than the temperature. They made their way down the tunnel, and as they walked, the walls seemed to close in on them. The floor was uneven, as if shifting beneath their feet. And then, the whispers started. Faint at first, barely audible, but undeniable. They could hear voices in the distance, but when they turned to look, no one was there. The whispers grew louder, clearer. One explorer named Jack stopped. His face went pale. He could feel it, the overwhelming presence of something watching. His breath became shallow and his legs felt weak. The others urged him to keep moving, but he couldn't. He turned to go back, only to find the tunnel behind them was gone. It was as if the walls had swallowed it whole. And that's when Jack vanished. The group searched desperately, calling his name, but the silence was deafening. There was no trace of him, not a single sign. They returned to the main building, shaken, but it didn't end there. The group returned days later, determined to find out what had happened to Jack. What they uncovered was worse than they could have imagined. The tunnels were not just abandoned. They were active, still used somehow, even though the asylum had been closed for decades. There were remnants of old surgical tools, rusted but unmistakable. And then there was the journal. The journal belonged to Dr. Edmund Cray, the asylum's head physician. Dr. Cray had been a brilliant mind in his time. But as his obsession with his work grew, so did his madness. According to the journal, Cray believed that the asylum was built on an ancient burial ground. And over the years, the asylum had become a place where the supernatural could manifest. Cray had begun conducting secret experiments. He believed that by pushing the limits of the human mind, using a combination of psychological manipulation and physical trauma, he could unlock powers that were beyond human understanding. He wasn't just experimenting with patients' minds. He was experimenting with their souls. The tunnels beneath the asylum had been where the most dangerous experiments took place. Patients were subjected to the worst of his treatments: sensory deprivation, mind-altering drugs, and most chilling of all, a device that Dr. Cray referred to as the veil. The device was intended to push a person's consciousness to the edge of reality, to make them see beyond the veil of life and death. Cray's obsession with the supernatural grew. He started to believe that by connecting with the spirits trapped in the asylum, he could harness their power. The whispers the explorers had heard? They weren't just echoes. They were the voices of the patients, trapped, tormented, and unable to escape. Cray's experiments had torn open a gateway between this world and the next. Dr. Cray's journal detailed the horrific outcome. One by one, the patients he subjected to his experiments went mad, or simply disappeared. Those who didn't vanish were left in a catatonic state, unable to communicate. The dark energy in the tunnels had seeped into the very bones of the building. And then, Dr. Cray disappeared too, leaving behind only his journal and a trail of madness. What the explorers didn't know was that the tunnel they had entered was not just a passage through the asylum. It was a prison. The spirits of those who died here, tortured and forgotten, were still trapped. And now, with the door reopened, they had returned. The investigators who followed years later experienced the same horrors. The equipment malfunctioned, the temperature dropped, and then came the noises, the whispers, now loud enough to make your skin crawl. The air turned thick, and shadows darted in the corners of the room, moving too fast to catch. One investigator, a skeptic, scoffed at the stories. But when he wandered too deep into the tunnel, he never came back. His team found him hours later, staring into the darkness, his eyes wide with terror, unable to speak. He had seen something that no one was meant to see. The lost tunnels of Vermouth Asylum are sealed away. But even now, they call to those who seek the truth. The building still stands, but the dark history it holds continues to whisper through the halls. What really happened beneath the floors? What was Dr. Cray hiding? No one knows for sure. The tunnels remain, a dark secret waiting to be uncovered. Some places are better left forgotten. Some doors should never be opened. Vermouth Asylum and its lost tunnels are just one of those places. What do you think about this story? Do you think it's true or not? Let me know in the comments, and we will reveal the truth in our next video. Now let's revisit our previous story, the terrifying legacy of the exorcism of Anneliese Michel, which is indeed true and supported by extensive evidence, including autopsy reports, court transcripts, and audio recordings of the exorcisms. Anneliese's death in 1976 sparked a highly publicized trial where her parents and the priests were charged with negligent homicide. The Catholic Church authorized the exorcisms, which were documented in detail, and the case led to revised church guidelines on exorcisms. While the supernatural claims remained debated, the core events, Anneliese's death, the exorcisms, and the legal aftermath, are historically accurate. This tragic case highlights the dangers of untreated mental illness and the consequences of conflating faith with science, leaving a legacy that continues to provoke discussion. If you enjoy our stories, please like the video and subscribe to the channel.